So thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to today's webinar to commemorate International Women's Day. We've started recording the session just for everyone to know. My name is Gigi Gatti, and I am the Technology for Development Director at Grameen Foundation. I also lead the technical services team that support our program strategy, design, and execution. We thank all of you for joining today, and a special shout out to our Capital Group friends out there who are listening in. Thanks to our partner organizations, Kiva and Search for Common Ground, for participating today as we talk about our collective efforts to forge a gender equal world. There will be time for questions and answers, and we invite you to submit your curiosities and questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. For those who are not familiar with the feature, it is found on your lower right-hand side of your Zoom screen. In Grameen Foundation, we use a human-centered approach to design. Next slide, please, Princha. So in Grameen Foundation, we use a human-centered approach to design our digital-enabled finance and farming solutions to help poor people in developing countries amplify their own capacity. You can see that at the center of this approach is our focus on women, the roles they play, and the ecosystem in which they live. Central to our work is the deep understanding that poor women and their families do not live in a vacuum. As an example, and for more than a decade now, we have recruited and trained women in rural communities to serve as community agents, trusted neighbors who deliver financial and agriculture services to their communities. However, it's not as simple as that. Strengthening a woman's ecosystem requires interconnected programs that promote not only her economic well-being, but also address gender equity, market engagement, health, and nutrition, among others. In today's discussion, we will focus on gender equity and gender-based violence. The World Health Organization estimates that around 35% of women globally experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Violence against women not only threatens lives, but also perpetuates female subordination. The negative impacts trickle down from the woman and her family to a country's human, social, and economic development. You will also hear today about the importance of access to credit to women's economic empowerment. Yet credit alone is not enough. And this is why women's economic empowerment initiatives require strong partnerships among organizations like our partners Kiva and Search for Social Ground, who have joined us today. Thank you both. Let me now hand this over to Amelia, Grameen Foundation's Regional Director for LAC in Asia, who will then introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Gigi, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Gigi mentioned, my name is Amelia Kuklovitz, and I manage our activities in the Latin American region as well as in Asia, and I'm saying hi to you today from the middle of the world in Quito, Ecuador. Next slide, please. I am joined by my esteemed colleagues, Lina Ramirez and Christina Chow, both from Kiva, and Marin O'Brien Belhussein from Search for Common Ground. Lina, would you start by introducing yourself and your organization?
Sure, Amelia. Thank you very much for this opportunity and invitation to be here. So as you said, my name is Lina Ramirez. I joined Kiva 1 year ago. I worked as an investment manager for the LAC region. I'm based here in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm very happy to be here in this webinar to share some thoughts.
Thanks. Christina, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina, and I lead strategic partnerships here at Kiva, connecting corporate and foundation partners to enable greater financial access through philanthropy and lending campaign engagements. As a former Grameen, having been in the Philippines with, I think, some of you at Capital Group, I'm also thrilled to be here.
Thanks so much, Christina. And Lauren.
Happy International Women's Day, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to join you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am joining you from Tacoma Park, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. I work for Search for Common Ground. And for those who don't know, Search is a worldwide organization, and our mission is to transform violent conflict. We do this through an approach called conflict transformation, where we partner with individuals, with communities to train in dialogue, in collaborative solutions for conflict resolution, trying to find ways in which to have communities, individuals come together across dividing lines to address deeply rooted problems in their contexts. I work on our institutional learning team, so I'm trying to capture ways in which we measure progress towards peace, whether or not we're resolving conflict, thinking about ways in which aspects of our work in one country might be applied to aspects of work in another country. I am happy to be with you and looking forward to talking about our work in El Salvador and Honduras.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next slide. Wonderful. So on this slide, I'd like to talk to you about our wage work at Grameen Foundation, the Women and Girls Empowered work that Grameen is a consortium member of. So since 2018, Grameen has been part of this global programming consortium, which is supported by the United States Department of State. And the vision is that women and girls enjoy equality, freedom from violence and poverty. And so what we're employing is a holistic approach that takes on three main programmatic areas. We're looking to prevent and respond better to gender-based violence. We're looking to advance the women's peace and security agenda, as well as supporting women's economic empowerment. So what's really cool about it is that all of our initiatives are looking at these three aspects and really trying to solve multiple interconnected problems at the same time. WAGE is led by the American Bar Association Rule of Law in close partnership with the Center for International Private Enterprise, Search for Common Ground, Grameen Foundation, and 43 resource partners, including Kiva, who's joining us today. As you can see on the map, we have current WAGE programming in El Salvador, Honduras, Ghana, Eswatini, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Timor-Leste. Today in our webinar, we're going to focus on the work that we're doing in El Salvador and Honduras. Next slide, please. So here we're kind of presenting this cross-cutting technical assistance, everything that we're doing under the initiative in El Salvador and Honduras, which is called our Reducing Barriers Initiative. After listening to women in El Salvador and Honduras, we designed a holistic three-level approach to reduce barriers. We're including programming directly for women entrepreneurs. Then we're working on organizational change by supporting microfinance institutions. And the third level is on the community level, where we're setting up linkages with other civil society actors so that women can get the resources that they need in health and in gender-based violence, as well as others. Christina, can you tell us a little bit more about our programming?
Sure. And just to back up, Kiva is a nonprofit organization focused on expanding financial access to help underserved communities thrive. One of the key ways that we do this is through our crowdfunding platform on kiva.org, in which anyone can lend as little as $25 to help make a change in someone's life. And we're certainly committed to expanding women's economic empowerment because research shows, and we've seen firsthand around the world, that women fuel efforts to build more inclusive and equitable communities for themselves, for their families, and again, for their communities. About 84% of the loans on Kiva support women, resulting in about 1.1 billion in lending to women to date on kiva.org. So we're thrilled to be part of WAGE to continue this trajectory and really enable everyday people to directly provide capital and opportunities to women.
Great, thanks so much. Maren, could you tell us a little bit more about the Women, Peace and Security Agenda?
Absolutely. For those who don't know, the Women, Peace, Security Agenda is a formal concept that was enshrined in UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Resolution 1325 was passed in October of 2000, so we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Women, Peace, Security Agenda coming to life. It's looked at a huge range of issues around the world and really evolved in the past 20 years. Women, peace, and security initiatives cover everything from community-based approaches to address drivers of insecurity and violence. And that's really where our work in El Salvador and Honduras falls. We've partnered closely with Grameen around the trainings offered under this assistance package to be sure that the gender power dynamics and conflict training, as well as the resilient business, resilient life training modules, really reflect the everyday experiences of women in El Salvador and Honduras as they relate to violence and insecurity issues.
Great, thanks so much, Maren. So as you've heard, we're working exclusively with women, but at the same time, we recognize in order to create systemic change, we need to involve multiple players and multiple actors. So women's entrepreneurs will be benefiting directly, as well as we are encouraging institutional change with local institutions. Next slide, please. So let's get into kind of our panel discussion and hear from our panelists. First, I think it would be great if we could open up our discussion by painting a picture for the audience. What is the overall ecosystem in El Salvador and Honduras? Lena, you want to get us started here?
Sure, Amelia. Thank you. So yes, as you said, it's important to have an overview of the ecosystem of both countries and the current situation they're living right now. So I want to focus the discussion in two main problems. First, the civil war, and then drug trafficking. To start first, El Salvador had a civil war that lasted 12 years and ended with a peace agreement that did not fully end up with the peace. History shows that if you sign a peace agreement, unfortunately, this does not necessarily mean that you're going to be able to implement it. And I think this is the case of El Salvador. It has passed almost 20 years now, and the country still is facing violence. And the reason for this is the big economic gap that you can find among the society. Therefore, small rebel groups, the so-called gangs or maras, created and are the ones who are still fighting for this peace agreement. Similar situation has happened in Honduras. And then the second problem that these two countries are facing is drug trafficking. From my perspective and analysis, this is a problem based on supply and demand. If the market is paying you for a product that pays 1,000 more than you would obtain for the entire coffee production, it is almost impossible to stop it. So yes, I believe both governments have shown efforts to stop this issue. However, it is very, very difficult to stop it from this perspective and analysis.
Great, thanks so much, Lena. Maren, would you like to give us a little more detail, especially from a conflict perspective?
Absolutely. As Gigi referenced earlier, it can be helpful to think about these entrenched problems in terms of a system, this overarching ecosystem that Amelia also described, and Lena gave more details about how the system of violence and insecurity is playing out in a big picture in El Salvador and Honduras. We can use a tool called conflict analysis to unpack what the dynamics mean for individuals in their everyday lives. In going through the process, things that we've really seen in El Salvador and Honduras are that, while these big systems of exclusion, marginalization, armed violence have really morphed over the decades, the conflict has never really been transformed. We still have these groups, the government and armed actors, whether they're rebel groups opposing the government or gangs today, they're in a struggle for control over territory, for the resources within that territory. So it may be in cities in El Salvador and Honduras, there's a struggle for control over neighborhoods, as well as what's passing through the neighborhoods, buses, taxis, transportation services. We see that local businesses are targets of crime, corruption, extortion. Buses, taxi drivers really suffer insecurity because of the struggle for control over resources. And so we see this repetition of these patterns of violence and insecurity really affecting sort of the day-to-day lives of people. And what does this mean for women? How does this look like for them? In both El Salvador and Honduras, there's a huge problem of femicide, or the killing of women, and it's really gone unaddressed, as do a lot of murders in countries. There's really a sense of impunity, that it is permissible or sort of okay that if you kill a woman, you won't necessarily be prosecuted for it. In fact, you probably won't be prosecuted for it. We see this sort of at, perhaps much less extreme than death, but in everyday lives, the role that machismo and sexism play in the lives of women as a way for struggle for control, or sort of playing out in individual interpersonal dynamics and families. Women business owners, we see, suffer extortion or sexual exploitation. So there's this huge range of ways that conflict, violence, and insecurity affect women and women business owners in El Salvador and Honduras.
That's great. Thank you both for painting such a clear picture of what life is on the ground for these women. I'd like to now look into the needs of women in the region, and specifically in El Salvador and Honduras. Lena, can you tell us why your organization, why Kiva, is choosing to focus on women, and why about their work in LAC?
Sure, Amelia, and I think this is a very important question, and the reason why is that we want to help women to find their voice. I think from the different conversations that we have had with our field partners and the microfinance institutions that we work with, and with the female borrowers, the main need for them is to have a position in their society. They want to feel value and recognized as capable to work, capable to have business, and also to create employment. So our vision in Kiva is to envision a financially inclusive world where all people hold the power to improve their lives. Based on that vision, we started in the continents that we perceived as the ones who needed this financial inclusivity the most, and these are Africa and Latin America. Since the beginnings of Kiva 15 years ago, we're working in these two regions, democratizing the access of credit by lending to the different partners that we have had and having impact in those investments. To give you some numbers, for Latin America, we have raised more than 40 million, which translates into more than 35,000 loans funded or borrowers. This is figures as of 2020.
Great, thanks so much, Lena. And I'd just like to add to what you mentioned. From the research that we completed on the ground in El Salvador and Honduras, we learned so much from women, in addition to wanting more training on how to build their business, as well as building their self-esteem. One of the points that we found that was really surprising and interesting was that women told us that they want their financial institution to be much more involved in their lives and understand all the roles that they're playing and the multiple pressures that they face. We may be surprised if Bank of America called us up one day and said, "Hey, how's your day going? How are you doing?" But this is exactly what women entrepreneurs were asking for. They work in such complicated environments that Lena and Maren described so well, and all the pressures that they face on a day-to-day just trying to run their business, that they do want this additional contact and relationship with their financial institutions. So we'd like to talk next about our barrier assessment. I kind of started to talk about that, which is the research that we did at the beginning of the project to look at some of the specific barriers that women were facing, both from looking at the legal barriers from around in the country, as well as directly speaking to women and the financial institutions through focus groups. So we took this very integrated approach, looking at these multiple structural, contextual, relationship barriers that women are facing to understand what's going on in their lives and help the MFIs, the microfinance institutions as well, be better equipped to address these challenges. I'd like to toss it to Maren, if you could share a little bit more of the details of what we found in this barrier assessment and anything that maybe surprised you.
Thanks, Amelia. One of the things that we saw that unfortunately wasn't a surprise were some of these key structural challenges around insecurity and violence. The thing that we took away from it, though, was the fact that we ultimately want to offer technical assistance or approaches that microfinance institutions, that women can take in order to improve their everyday lives or manage these issues better. So, we're not going to say, okay, there's this barrier of gang violence. We're going to try to train women to negotiate with gangs or reach out across some of these dividing lines. But we can help women have more skills. Organizations, the MFI organizations, have a better understanding of the conflict context so that they can navigate them a little bit better. Other barriers that we heard about from MFIs and from the key informant interviews that Amelia described were opportunities, or the barriers were lack of financial education or professionalization of services, a barrier around access to finance and credit. On an interpersonal level, just lack of confidence or self-esteem was reported by a number of women. And additionally, a lot of people throughout the spectrum of individual or organizational representation cited machismo or sexism as a key barrier to their work. So, we looked at these as ways that we could have targeted technical assistance that could unlock change around some of these issues if we were able to address them, to really start to shift the aspects of both work and productivity in people's lives, as well as sort of a way to integrate some of that conflict understanding or understanding of insecurity that search brings. And so that was sort of, I would say, a really nice surprise, that it's saying, oh, people really see these as interconnected issues. It's not just sort of we as international outsiders saying, you should sort of take this very technical approach and analyze the situation in these ways, and we'll come and help you. It was really sort of an opportunity to say, oh, our understanding is similar to yours in these ways, and there's a real opportunity to work together to address some of the key needs and barriers cited by microfinance institutions and women in these countries.
That's great, Maren, and thanks so much for describing how well we looked at a human-centered design approach and really worked with the communities to find practical solutions. So let's dive into our response and understand, what we did after understanding these needs. As Maren mentioned, one of these issues was this barrier around the lack of access to credit. So I'd like to toss it to Christina with our solution there.
Sure. As part of WAGE, we created a loan fund to specifically address women's barriers to access to credit, putting women and only women at the front of the line. So for every $25 that a crowdfunding lender like you or me lent on kiva.org to these women, the WAGE loan fund matched dollar for dollar. So over the last 3 years, loans provided critical financing to women entrepreneurs, allowing them to really decide how they wanted to grow their own businesses. And through our local partner, Credicampo in El Salvador, one of these women, Yancy, who was a farmer, was looking for a $1,000 loan to grow her corn tortilla shop business. And I'll let Yancy tell her story herself, but fair warning, it might make y'all hungry. We're just gonna play a quick video of Yancy's story. We could also play the video after if it's not working. Maybe we'll skip the video and then cue it up at the end.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks, Christina. Maren, can you tell us a little bit more about our response and kind of the technical expertise that Search has brought to the project?
Absolutely. So Search has a standard package of training called the Common Ground Approach. It's a 3-day training that talks people through the difference between conflict and violence. It looks at surfacing sort of the visible ways that conflict and violence shape our lives, as well as the invisible ways that sort of bubble below the surface and might affect our experience of the world. It includes dialogue training, also working to unlock core human emotions such as empathy, and how we might be more active listeners or empathetic listeners to people who we don't necessarily agree with. So through this wage initiative in El Salvador and Honduras, we had the opportunity to look at the standard approach and really tailor it to the needs of women in the two countries. It was a real opportunity to say, how does conflict and economic issues intersect? Grameen has some core approaches and themes, and it was really interesting to walk through and say, okay, there's this session here from Search's approach that really matches Grameen's session here, and design trainings together in a way that addresses these conflict issues and economic issues that women face holistically.
That's great, Maren. Thank you. Yeah, I can't speak highly enough of how well our gender and power dynamics training combined with Search's Common Ground approach. It was really, really impactful to see how the microfinance staff was able to really unpack a lot of issues around bias, around prejudice, around the relationships on multiple levels, at their family level, at their households, and their relationships with colleagues, as well as the women they serve. I'll also add that part of our response was developing the Resilient Life and Resilience Business training education modules, which we've developed in an in-person training as well as a digital version. And that's going to be rolled out to women beneficiaries directly. As we had mentioned, we saw that barrier around self-esteem and around lack of professionalization within their businesses. And so a whole series of topics and sessions that'll really help them professionalize their businesses, as well as talk about those multiple roles that we've been hearing that women are playing, and helping them negotiate those relationships. If we could go to the next slide, I'd like to tell you the story of Rosa, who is one of the women who participated in the gender conflict and power dynamics training. She's from our partner in Honduras, ODEF. And, she really saw the value in talking about roles that women and men play, and being able to see their clients in a different way, so that they're not only respecting where they're at, but also speaking to them in a way that they can understand. And the other big takeaway, which is huge as far as, thinking about attitude changes, not defining a person based on how he or she looks, that we could, get carried away and make assumptions about people. So it's better to really, delve into and getting to know people a lot better before passing any judgment. I want to just quick check if we're possible to play the video. Otherwise, I will continue on with my questions. We're going to give it a try. I'm going to guess that we're still having some technical issues, so I will continue on and wait, Princess. There we go.
primer crédito que saqué en Credit Campo fue para un cafetín en la escuela. Fue hace como 8 años que empecé a trabajar con el banco, pero ya el año pasado, por lo de la pandemia, que cerraron las escuelas, lo hemos invertido en otra clase de negocio. Hacemos empanadas, en esta ocasión las empanadas, tamales de elote, riguas con quesillo, un poquito de cada cosa, o sea, toda la semana trabajamos y la ventaja es que no salimos a las casas, solo ofrecemos la venta y aquí vienen a traer las cosas o se les va a dejar el pedido. Nos ha traído muchos beneficios porque de mi familia yo fue la que inicié haciendo créditos y ahora mi mamá, mi hermana, o sea, todos trabajamos con Credit Campo, los ha dado mucho beneficio porque yo gracias al crédito he sacado adelante a mis hijos trabajando y igual les enseño a ellas a hacer todo tipo de ventecitas y juntas vamos a seguir adelante y gracias al apoyo del banco.
As Christina mentioned, I would not be surprised if we're all hungry at this point. And thanks for Yancy for really teeing us up for our next question of, the resilience around the COVID-19 pandemic, which we're just coming around a year at. If I could have the next slide, please. So to start out, Lena, can you kind of talk about how COVID-19 has impacted our work and specifically about Kiva's crisis support loans?
Sure, Amelia. Well, as you said, that was something that I guess none of us saw coming to our lives. So when all the crisis started, we said, okay, we need to do something. And I think this is something that I do love from working with Kiva. And it was the fast response that we had at the beginning of the pandemic last year. We said, we've been working with the borrowers of our field partners to support them. But now, how can we support our field partners? How can we help them to go through this crisis and support them in any way, leveraging from our platform? So we said, okay, let's do something that we've never done before in Kiva's history, and let's start posting loans for our MFIs to help them surf this moment in time so they can pay payrolls, rents, bills, whatever liquidity needs they might have at the moment. No, I think that's something that Kiva really does different from other international lenders or funders in different markets. So we decided to leverage, as I mentioned before, our experience and knowledge with our marketplace and developed a product that was called a crisis support loan. So the purpose was funding large-scale loans to Kiva's partner, financial institutions, and social enterprise in the field that helping those organizations bridge funding gaps. That was the idea. With these loans, they were able to continue to serve their borrowers during the pandemic and also to help them survive and sustainable their businesses. The results were amazing. At the end, we ended up funding globally $8 million, from which $3 million were especially for the LAC region. So that was something that we believe were fantastic, and I think our field partners appreciated very much.
That's great, Lena. And we can't highlight enough how important it is to get credit plus other services directly in the hands of beneficiaries. As part of the project, as part of the initiative, Grameen Foundation and Search for Common Ground also pivoted as part of our COVID response. So we continue to provide remote technical assistance. We've digitized our resilient life and resilient business education. So women entrepreneurs will have direct access to information directly within their phones. And we've been working through local consultants to make sure that any of the needs on the ground are able to be addressed as quickly and safely as possible. So now I think, I'm sure our audience is all excited. They know what's going on in the region. They've heard about all the great things we're doing. So I'd love to talk about the impact that the project and our work has been having in El Salvador and Honduras. Christina, do you want to talk a little bit more about this impact?
Sure. So we started with about 737,000 in initial funding in 2018 for the project. And our goal was to serve 1,700 women like Yancy with access to finance. The women, surprise, surprise, did repay their loans and repaid on time. So we continued to relend those funds again and again through this one loan fund, multiplying the impact of the original funding and helping borrowers to get funded twice as fast. Fast forward to now, and our wage loan fund has supported 8,800 female entrepreneurs with nearly $4.5 million in loans from that initial $700,000. So that exceeded our goal by 600%, which is just incredible. But I think most importantly, 8,800 more women have had a chance to grow their business and again, better their lives and the lives of their families.
Great. Christina, do you want to tell one of these stories? Next slide, please.
Sure.
Thanks.
This is Maria Presentacion, whose name might sound strange in English, but fun fact, her mom gave her that name because of the presentation of our Lord Jesus Christ. So she's very much a religious person. She's 80 years old, a single mother, and has 8 children. And she lives in a quiet village surrounded by farming fields called Los Olivos in Honduras, and has always worked in agriculture. So she's definitely has a lot of experience. She didn't go to school, so she can't read or write, but for 33 years, she has been planting and harvesting vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, and lettuce. About 2 years ago, she asked for her first $225 loan for vegetable seeds and soil enhancements. And she has crops on her own land. She sells extra yields that she gets to other families and in the local market. And then in 2020, last year, she asked for a $625 loan after she repaid off that initial $225 loan. So she received a second loan to purchase liquid fertilizers and more vegetables and seeds. So this year, she expects a better harvest and continues to dream about growing her business to give her family and her new grandchildren a better quality of life, especially after COVID. And the death of her husband a few years ago. Her family meets every Sunday without fail to pray and to have dinner. And especially with this pandemic, she truly is proud to still be able to put food on the table for her family.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that heartfelt story. We really, really appreciate hearing from the women that we're supporting directly. Lena, do you want to give us a little bit more details?
Yes. Amelia, also I want to add as well that as Christina mentioned, and as I also mentioned in the beginning, before the impact they are having on their self-esteem is enormous. They are feeling valued as women, and they are having the opportunity of being economically independent, and also they are feeling they can make a change in reactivating the economy by creating employment. So I think that's something that is really impactful. And also we have to highlight the profile of these women that we are financing. They are very different, as they are single mothers, vulnerable women, and also senior citizens who usually don't have access to credit. So there is where we also see an impact created. We are really reaching to an unserved and unattended segment of the gender ecosystem.
Thank you so much for both of you. I just like to highlight how much these marginalized groups are being supported and helped. I'd like to compliment as well on an organizational level the trainings that Maren had mentioned that we conducted together with Grameen Foundation were extremely powerful. One of the things that we found was that the issues around, gender roles, the role that power plays, and how conflict is lived out in everyday lives are issues that microfinance institutions aren't talking about regularly. These aren't in, trainings or onboarding processes for new hires. And so we were really able to uncover and unpack how these topics are affecting family life, their work life among colleagues, and the interaction with clients. We had multiple participants who talked about, after the first day of the training, they asked their their friends and their family and children, what role has gender played, or how are power dynamics being played out in our family, and is there anything that I can do better? And so it's just really amazing impact there. And it's important to talk about how financial service providers can be both a facilitator to women's entrepreneurs as well as a gatekeeper. And so talking about these barriers, as we had discussed at the beginning of the webinar, is really important to offer people financial services in a more intentional way and really help remove barriers. Next slide, please. Great. So to kind of build off of that, I think let's hear from another beneficiary. This is Will. He's from our other organization in El Salvador, Padecom's Credito, and he's the business manager there, and he attended one of the gender conflict and power dynamics trainings. We've been talking a lot about the women's experience throughout the webinar, and it's just as important to involve men in our programs. So we wanted to highlight his story. Men are also existing in this complicated ecosystem that the panelists described, and they're also affected by power dynamics. So these trainings have really helped men unearth their beliefs and better understand their role in helping women entrepreneurs. So as you can see, Will tells us that the most important thing that he felt in this workshop was really talking about these cultural patterns. So things that are going on in the country, either myths or prejudices that may be provoking some sort of an automatic response that are not very, conscious of. And so the challenge is really going to be working on the new generations. And he, had a lot to say about how the training is going to help him even, as a father and with his relationships with his family, and is really more aware about how to improve at work with his family and the community, and really to lead by example. So this is really a great story to hear about, men's engagement and someone who can act as a force for change. Perfect. So I think let's move on to we've got a couple of minutes. We're doing great on time to do some questions and answers for all of our panelists. So as Gigi mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, there's the Q&A function within the Zoom call. So feel free to drop any comments there, and we'll be fielding those, and I'll be helping us facilitate the different questions. So what's our first question?
Amelia, our first question is, how are the issues of migration in these regions impacting women?
Great, perfect. Thanks so much, Terry. Yeah, I'm sure this has been on the minds of a lot of our participants and panelists as well. So I'll get started, and I'll let Christina and Marin and Lena jump in. So, definitely El Salvador and Honduras, as we've seen in the news since, a year and a half ago, has been, affected by the additional insecurity in the countries and the different migration movements that have been going out through the to enter into the United States. And so, it's really has a lot to do with economic instability, and so not having a viable business or the safety around having a business really forces people to migrate and forces people into some really dire situations. And so, from what we've seen in the women that we spoke with, they told us this was really the last and worst case scenario, that it's not an option that they would want to migrate, but as a result of the crisis and the economic situation, a lot of them have been forced to. Marin, I'll let you jump in first, and feel free, Christina or Lena, to help answer that question.
Thanks, Amelia. I think, another aspect of migration is migration and being forced back from sort of a U.S. border being closed, or, even, again, thinking back to some of the origins of dynamics of conflict in the region. There were gangs we speak of today, quote unquote, exported from the United States, or the origins of gangs in Los Angeles, in other cities in the US. And so we have to think about the ways in which this is sort of these cycles of violence aren't just sort of forcing migrants to the US and migration out of these countries, but we are really looking at ways in which US is sending people back to El Salvador, back to Honduras for various reasons. And we really want to be able to address these root causes so that people are not forced to leave in the first place, as you're describing, feeling that people have opportunities to have businesses, have healthy lives in a huge range of ways, and that we don't have this cyclical pattern of travel that's really sort of unsafe for migrants themselves. We want people to be able to have healthy lives in the places that they choose.
Yes, and I will thank you, Maureen, and also Amelia for all those answers. I would like to also comment that definitely there's an impact on the migration side, and especially also in the rural areas. We see that our female borrowers, their children are migrating to the US or even to other Central American countries like maybe Nicaragua or Costa Rica to get more opportunities or to find more opportunities. So that leaves them with a lot of huge problem because they don't have any other people to take care of their crops if they are not there. So that's something that we're also trying to prevent, and by helping them and also trying to support them by different programs with technical assistance and different alliances that we have in Kiva, so that they are able to teach their children, and so that they can pass over the bar in terms of rurality and also agriculture. So definitely there's something that is having an impact, but I think we're doing also some efforts there.
I'll just also quickly add that on a macro scale, we've seen that our partners are very hesitant to lend to refugees specifically as part of this migration community. And so having data and proof points to share, from the Middle East to Latin America or vice versa is really important. And at the beginning, our partners were hesitant. So we helped them create refugee lending products and started to measure this information. And so, for example, in 2017, we saw $1 million in lending to refugees through our partners for the whole year. And last year, we saw $1 million just on World Refugee Day alone across our partners. So we're seeing an increasing comfort level with our financial service partners to start lending to these marginalized populations.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, ladies, for providing those details. That's really helpful. Terry, what's our next question?
Amelia, we have a question. What would your ideal outcome for the region be in terms of, would it be more women reached? Would it be some leapfrog achievements? How might you describe perfect outcomes?
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's a complicated environment to work in, as I'm sure everybody's realized. And so, we really see our role at this institutional level of microfinance organizations and civil society organizations to really push forward the conversation. Within the initiative as well, we've been engaging with government entities and kind of more national organizations as well to kind of bring the project to light and make sure that, they're seeing these barriers. Ideally, I think there's a lot to do on that institutional level as far as really changing behaviors and being able to create more women-centered financial products. I think is a great place to start. And that's, a lot of work with the field workers, all of the management staff to really be able to move forward. Also, ideally is what we've been pushing for is a lot of policy change within the institutions as well. So we've been working with them to create gender policies, improving their HR policies, as well as taking a look at a do no harm policy, so they're ensuring that they aren't causing any harm to their clients. Absolutely, outreach is great. As you've seen, you know, these over 8,000 women who have been benefited and got their loans funded so quickly is really important. But I'll let Christina, I'm not going to steal Christina's thunder on that. So I'd love to hear from Kiva.
Yeah, I think again, it's focusing on women and fueling funds to let women decide how they want to start, create, grow their own businesses. Kiva is not prescriptive in that way, and they know their families and their communities and their businesses better than we do, and so we let the women decide, as long as it's responsible, how they should invest the money that they're lent. So I think success means empowering women to make that choice for themselves and for their families, and to really give them that access to credit and then future financial services like savings or insurance, possibly, to allow them to continue to succeed in what they want to do. And like Lena said, and maybe you want to talk about it again, just increasing the confidence that women see in themselves.
Yes, I might also emphasize that. I would say that the ideal world will be to see all these women really empowered, right? And to be able to see that their self-esteem is high, that they don't have fear, that maybe all the violence that we are seeing in these regions is over. And yeah, I think that's the ideal world for us. Also, both envision that financial inclusive world that we have in our vision.
Great. Marin, anything to complement there of kind of what your ideal outcome would be in the region?
Absolutely. One of the things we haven't talked much about today, but is a big conversation in the sector, is what does sustainability look like when our organizations, whether it's Search for Common Ground or Grameen Foundation, are no longer running this project, or Kiva. There's this long-term institutional support, but how does that sort of transition to better economies overall? And so, one of the outcomes that we're really looking to achieve through our work is ingraining these ideas, ingraining these approaches in people's lives, as Lena and Christina were talking about, ingraining them in the organization's fabric, as you talked about, Amelia, so that we can pull back as international organizations and really sort of let others who are in the region, who are living and working on these issues every day, take concepts and run with them, so that we see long-term impact without our presence.
That's great. Thanks, Marin, for mentioning the sustainability pathway for all of our organizations have in mind. I'd like to pass back on to Gigi, who can kind of help us out with our closing thoughts and wrap us up today. Thank you so much.
Ladies, that was very enjoyable. I especially like the stories. So thank you, Amelia, Lena, Christina, and Marian, for all that you've shared. As I said, I particularly love the stories. And I hope everyone noticed that when you ask these women, how their lives are improved, they always drill down to the impact at the family level and not just talk about themselves. So in conclusion, we've heard how the enabling environment needed for women's economic empowerment is a really, really complex one. While there are many opportunities, there are also many barriers that need to be addressed, such as access to credit, training and information on running businesses, soft skills training, structural barriers such as land ownership, gender-based violence, crisis support, among others. Some specific examples that we shared today are democratizing credit through Kiva's working capital loans, which turned into crisis loans, in the midst of pandemic-related, issues. Grameen's Resilient Life, Resilient Business, and Gender and Power Dynamics trainings. Search for Common Ground's targeted technical assistance for MFIs on navigating through understanding conflict, addressing insecurities and barriers such as machismo, and their common ground approach. So as you can see, one organization cannot do it all. Catalytic partnerships such as the Women and Girls Empowered Consortium are critical to pull this through. All of us three organizations are presenting today are core members of the WAGE Consortium. And once again, we are very grateful for your time, interest, and support. Please do support us. Do not tire supporting us. Next slide, please, Princha. Your financial support will go a long way in helping Yancy, Christina, Anna, and Reina, who you've seen in the previous slide, find their voice and prosper. Please do spread the word and the stories to your family and friends. Consider supporting us. The link to our fundraising links are in this slide. And with this, I will leave you with a quote from former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. There is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women. I hope we have inspired you today, and please have a good day or evening ahead of you. So bye for now. Thank you so much.